Hello everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of ARG Presents. I am Amigo Aaron, joined as always by the Master System Master, John Boat of Carshaller.
Nobody actually calls me that.
What? I can't believe that, the Master. So, if you joined us last week, you would have heard that this week's a special episode, Mr. Boat.
What do you call this episode, Aaron?
The Switcheroo episode. This week, we chose games for each other without any prior knowledge or conversation. We both happen to choose games on the Master System. This is in fact a Master System 2, which is what I own, which I would say is the uglier, stupider cousin of the original Master System. Now, Boat, have you ever owned a Master System?
I did. I once owned a Master System 1. I picked it up in a pawn shop or a thrift store somewhere, and but I rarely played it because I want to say, did it have composite out? Did we know?
Well, I would wager the original had RF out like this one does.
And I think that I didn't have the right cable or something, and I never actually hooked it up in all the years that I owned it.
How did you get it and not know that?
Well, I bought it just because I collected all kinds of
I see.
nonsense.
So this was, okay, I understand.
It was part of the collection.
Well, the Master System was popular in different places. It wasn't popular everywhere, but in some places it was super popular. So a little bit on the Master System. Released October 20th, 1985. What were you doing in 85, Boat?
85? See, I was getting ready to start kindergarten.
I was getting ready to start high school. So this had an install base. Now this number seems huge to me. This is what I confirmed it in a couple places. 16,390,000 units.
That's very good.
Now I wonder how many of those were down in Brazil, where this was super duper popular.
I hear that Brazil is the Master System capital of the world.
It is. It really is. This had an initial offering price of 200 buckaroos US dollars. In today's money, being that today everything's gone way up, 454 bucks. Not as bad as some of the other systems we've looked at, but still a hefty fee. This had produced for officially 348 games, Boat, which is a lot. But again, and we've mentioned Brazil, and one thing to go into about that game total is a lot of games came for the Master System late in its life. I mean, late. Into the 90s, because this system caught on in Brazil and was very popular. And really up until probably I'd say the early 2000s or late 90s was still a fairly viable, supported system, which was very bizarre. But hey, it's got a lot going for it. It has two 9-pin controller ports on it, which basically are just like the Atari, just like the Genesis, and the controllers for it are these kind of tiny. If the Genesis and the Nintendo Entertainment System had a baby, you would probably get these kind of nutty Master System controllers.
Now, you don't actually own any controllers for your Master System.
No, I do.
Right?
I do have some.
You just chose not to bring them.
I forgot to bring them, but I do have a couple of them. And I also have the gun. This had a blaster that came with, and the blaster is standard fare, but it does a good job. The original Master System had a few things this one does not. And one of the things it had was a card slot. It actually, you could read cards, not unlike the TurboGrafx 16 smaller, flatter cards. And they would have smaller games on the cards, and there was an inexpensive way to distribute your games. The original was a much sleeker looking unit. This one, on the other hand, the Master System 2, which was the kind of cut down, cut rate, we compressed a bunch of chips together, it's been out for years unit, had built-in games. This one, I believe, has Wonder Boy. I'm trying to think it's Wonder Boy Monster Land or something like that. And then some of these even shipped with Sonic on them as they pack-in games.
Now, the original Master System actually also had a pack-in game built in.
Yeah, tell us about that.
It was a maze game called Snail. This game did not win any major awards.
No, no kidding. I can imagine that. So, it's funny. I wrote down what this launched with, just for fun. All right. In Japan, this launched with Hang On and Teddy Boy Blues. Which, have you ever heard of Teddy Boy Blues?
No.
I haven't either. In North America, it launched with Hang On and Safari Hunt. Hang On, by the way, is pretty good for this. I've got it. It's pretty fun. In Europe, you got the lineup was Action Fighter, Black Belt, Choplifter, Fantasy Zone, Hang On, Transbot, and World Grand Prix. So that's kind of neat. Clearly, Europe had the of course, it launched there about a year later.
Mm-hmm. But it definitely came out swinging much more than it did here in the States.
And this had quite a following in the UK and in some parts of Europe as well. In America, did you know anyone that had a Master System that lived here domestically?
Never.
I've never seen, when I came across, in fact, I will say, just as a side note, this little Master System helped get me, it drugged me stupidly to collecting retro systems. I was working an arcade deal with my brother, this guy's house. He was moving out of state. Everything had to go. And I think my brother was trying to wrangle a Miss Pac-Man out of this guy. And so I ended up buying, I can't remember what I bought, but I saw that he had a box with this Master System, and I was like, hey, are you selling that Master System? He's like, yeah. I was like, what do you want for it? He said he wanted $20. And I was like, is that up with all the games? He's like, yeah, well, what the heck? Yeah, all the games. And I grabbed, there was like 30 games in the box with the instructions, the whole 9 yards. So I instantly had a Master System collection. It's the first Master System I'd ever seen in my life. Mm-hmm. I was like, what is it?
One of the advantages of the Master System, collecting for the Master System, is that games are almost always found complete in box because unlike Nintendo, which came in your normal cardboard box, Sega produced sort of VHS-style plastic cases that are nearly indestructible.
Yeah. If every system had cases like the Master System, everything would be like that.
Yeah.
It is a great case. And, of course, the Genesis had a similar case. But, I mean, I love those. I mean, the Odyssey has more attractive cases, but they were paper. These were nice plastic. They weren't the most attractive. And the Master System has some of the games have some god-awful art. I mean, just horrible.
As we'll see when we go to these games.
A black belt in particular, I believe there's a big foot on the front of it. It's notoriously bad. But the actual cases, there was a little place in there for the cartridge, a little place in there. The cards even had, so it was a good setup. So with all that in mind, we will go ahead and kick it off. Do you have anything else to say about the Master System?
Well, I was going to say, the TurboGrafx cards were called Hue cards.
That's right.
Do you know what the Sega cards were called?
I don't. What were they called?
MasterCards.
MasterCards. Oh! Please tune into Bo's Comedy podcast, appearing on a radio near you. Good God. Well, with that lovely little anecdote, do you want to lead the show here?
Sure. All right. So my game this week is Choplifter. Choplifter was it started out as an Apple II release in 1982 and was published by Broderbund. This was programmed by a guy named Dan Gorlin. So if you watch our sister show, Amigos, we talked about another one of his games called Typhoon Thompson a few weeks ago.
That's where I got the idea.
Yeah. So Dan Gorlin is an interesting person. He started out working at a think tank in the States called RAND, researching AI, and for whatever reason, he decided to dip his toe into programming. So he's most famous for this game. This is his biggest hit by far. But he produced a few other games, notably Typhoon Thompson, which we covered on Amigos episode 134. Dan's main gig now is teaching and performing with the Al Kholi West African Dance Troupe, a community dance drumming club based in Philadelphia.
I love that.
So yeah, that's how he spends his days these days. However, the Master System version of Choplifter is not the one that Dan Gorlin programmed. In 1985, Sega released a coin-op arcade remake of Choplifter, which was in turn ported to both the NES and the Sega Master System in 1986, and that is the version that we'll be talking about today. This is one of the few games that first appeared on a home system and was later ported to the arcades. That used to be a rare thing, but now it's more and more common as we see the Flappy Bird arcade game and Angry Birds arcade games and things like that.
Well, I think when a game's a hit at home, they can have it, and since the arcade's a tougher bet these days, at least they know they've got a surefire winner when they put it out there.
Right. As you talked about, this was part of the initial launch series of games in the UK release of the Master System. I think it's a pretty solid title. I think Sega did a really good job of porting its arcade titles to its own system. Just like Nintendo did a pretty good job converting Donkey Kong to the NES, Sega did the best it could with games like Afterburner and Choplifter and Space Harrier and things like that. So Choplifter, what is it? You are a helicopter pilot whose job it is to save POW POWs, hostages that are in these camps. You've got to save a set number of them before you're able to go on to the next area. Your helicopter, it actually has a name. This is the only version of the game where they named the helicopter.
Oh, I didn't even know that. What's it called?
It's called a Hawk Z.
Oh, that's a good name.
Yeah. And your helicopter, it can fire and face. It can face and fire facing. Boy, that's an awkward sentence. I wonder who wrote that. Me. Left, right, and towards the screen. So you're going to have to be able to maneuver your helicopter almost through not really 3 dimensions, but 3 separate directions to take out your adversaries. So. In this game, what you do is you take off in your helicopter. Each stage starts with you taking off from your home base. You swoop out over the horizon, and you are met with different things. There's tanks. There's things that are firing at you from the ground. There's birds up in the air. You've got to get to a building where hostages are kept, and you have to land. The hostages come to your helicopter. You pick them up, and you take them back to your base. You repeat this over and over again. The more you go through the game, the harder it becomes, the more hostages you have to save. One of the things that makes this version different than the original Apple II game is that Dan Gorlin, he didn't like games that kept score. He thought score was dumb. So it was all about rescuing a set number of hostages, going back, and then that number of hostages just keeps increasing. In the Master System version of the game, there is a score involved as well as the number of hostages. So, what did you think of Choplifter?
Well, I will say I'm old, as you know, and I remember playing this when it came out on the Apple II. In fact, I had I had started basic programming as a kid on the Apple II. Hated that machine. Just a horrible, unreliable machine in my opinion. And I hated their basic too. It was real oddball. But one thing I didn't hate was playing Choplifter. This game was, I couldn't freaking believe how cool it was, and what a cool concept back when, of course, you saw a lot more original gameplay. But this one, I was like, man, that's great, you know. And you felt pretty good. You're over there rescuing the guys in the original. You just basically, you sort of went across like a flat land, and there was sort of some barbed wire fencing you'd fly across, and you'd be in enemy territory, and there'd be planes and tanks coming at you, and you drop them off. I have played the arcade game a few times on the arcade cabinet that I've got, and it's fun. And I think this is an incredibly good and fairly accurate translation. I don't know if you've played the arcade game that much.
I've never played it,
but I think this is one of the better. It's certainly one of the better looking Master System titles. Colorful, beautiful, different scenery. The scrolling, the multiple layers, sort of parallax scrolling. The guys look great. The helicopter looks cool. The stuff that's after you looks cool. There's lots of different weapons. There's lots of different enemies flying around. It seems busy. One thing, the original seems sort of, and again, this was the Apple II, so their technology jumped leaps and bounds, but it was sort of sparse, you know, and it felt sort of like an era, only 1 or 2 things around. This, I mean, there's crazy stuff way off in the distance. There's junk going back and forth, depending on what level you're on. There's choppers flying by in the background, and airplanes. So it's just awesome looking, and the effect of the scrolling and stuff is really good. I like the sound. I like pretty much everything about it. Now, the one thing I will say is I found this, much like the arcade, I found this a lot more difficult than the Apple II version.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, this is made to make money,
right?
And so, and I will say, I think they toned it down somewhat in the Master System version, but it ain't easy.
It's a lot more intense.
It is.
The one thing I wish this game had was some sort of a smart weapon, where if things were really going bad, you could hit a button and just kill everything on the screen. Yeah,
it would have been nice if you could have had if you could have taken the chop out of like Silkworm, where you had some of that, you get the double
extra
shot
artillery, yeah.
But I mean, this game expands on the original quite a bit. There are several different scenarios. There's one that's in like out like on the open sea. Then there's a cave one. Then you've got the one on like the open field, the battlefield. It's real fun, which that's something else that differentiates it from the home port. I thought the controls were pretty solid. You have to learn how to fly this chopper. And one thing it shares with its computer counterpart is that it really, you need to take a minute to understand how the chopper works. You know what I'm saying? You've got a sort of like a turn. You've got to learn how to turn the chopper and how to land and take off quickly. This one's a lot. I think the arcade and the Master System version is a lot more gentle when it comes to how you get up and go down. I mean, you could pretty much come straight down. You're not going to crash or anything. But man, I really liked it. I wanted to give you a good treat, and I thought you'd like it. And so I thought of what my favorite Master System games were, and this was the one that was near the top of the list. It's a lot of fun.
It's really, really great. This game did have some sequels. There was a game called Choplifter 2 Rescue Survive. It was released for the Game Boy in 1991, and it was remade for both the Game Boy and Game Gear as Choplifter 3 a couple years later in 1994. There was also another game called Choplifter 3 that I guess is unrelated to any of the other games that was released for the Super Nintendo.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Now, did you ever play this on the NES?
No. In fact, I think that most of my Choplifter I played on an original black and white Macintosh.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So it was very similar to my experience on the Apple II then. As far as it's funny, as much as I ragged on the Apple II, just a segue, a lot of really good games started on the Apple II. It's quite, and we cover a lot of stuff that gets its roots from the Apple II, including stuff like Prince of Persia, and there were that was the programmer's choice, I think, early on, just because it had capabilities.
Well, it had color graphics in an era where there weren't a lot of that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it really had capabilities that it was the first really capable machine of actually playing games that looked like something and played like something realistic. So, kudos for that. I will say this, as much as I rag on the thing. And to be fair, a lot of computers back in those days were sort of unreliable. So you liked it then?
I did. I liked it very much. I looked it up on eBay. This is not an expensive game. You can, in fact, with a lot of Master System games, I found the loose price and the boxed price are almost identical.
Yeah, I noticed as well.
You can get this one loose. I saw a couple sell for around $10 shipped. You can get it complete for about $15.
Yeah, that sounds about right, man.
Yeah. All right, Aaron, you ready to talk about your game for this week?
Sure. So Bo tasked me with playing Pro Wrestling for the Sega Master System. This came out in Japan on July 20th, 86, in North America in 86, and in Europe in 87. It seems to be a trend, right? The Europeans always come out
a little bit later. They have to do all the localization for languages and things.
This was developed and published by Sega. So to get into this title, a little background, which the background I think is more interesting than the actual title. In pro wrestling in Japan, it's known as Gokaku Dome Dump Matsumoto.
I like the word dump in there.
Well, there's a reason that dump is in there, because in Japan, this is a game based around a wrestler named Dump Matsumoto, which I've seen many times. She was part of one of my all-time favorite tag teams.
This is a female wrestler.
Yes, and that was sort of the big payoff of this. In Japan, this is an all-women's wrestling game.
Really?
There are no men.
Wow.
And it is based around Dump Matsumoto and her stable in Japan of bad girls against the two biggest, probably of all time, the two biggest Japanese female tag teams. But Dump Matsumoto and her perpetual tag team partner, Bull Nakano. Now, Dump and Bull are one of the all-time great.
That's a great
heel
nickname.
Tag team.
It's a great tag team name, Dump and Bull.
Yeah. Now, this is based on the arcade machine of the same name. This was actually an arcade game, which actually I've played this a few times on the main machine with similar results to me playing it on here. But again, it's all Japanese women versus the boys. In Japan, there are really two sets of teams, much like in America, it's just different names. You've got one team based on Dump Matsumoto's stable, the Gokaku Dome. The one team is Bull Nakano and Dump, and the other one is Condor Sato, and a masked wrestler, which isn't named. And I'm sure this is a real wrestler from back then, but I don't know which one it is, because I'm not gonna lie, my All Japan Women's Wrestling from the 80s is a little slow. But I will say, not to dip too far into pro wrestling, but it is widely considered that the mid-'80s and early 80s, All Japan Women's Wrestling was the finest wrestling of all women's wrestling, and amongst the men, it's way up there. Tremendous wrestlers. Dump, I was more of a Bull Nakano fan. If you ever saw Dump and Bull and as they got older, it's funny, Japanese women are sort of all the same when they start. They wear a black one-piece suit, and they wear boots and they just come out and they fight. But as they develop personalities, their outfits and stuff changes. What happened with Dump? She got real heavy and was like, when we were making, was just a bulldozer, just a big bruiser. And Wunderkind was probably 6'2", 250.
Wow.
Monster. And she used to spike. She had long hair that she would shoot straight up and it would be dyed blue. And she'd have, these were two murderous women. I mean, they were just bad, bad women. So the two teams in the Japanese version, the good girl teams, are the Jumping Bomb Angels and the Crush Gals. Well, these are the two most popular women's tag teams of all time, of all the times. The Jumping Bomb Angels are Norio Tatino and Isuke Yamazaki, and the Crush Gals were Lioness Asuka and Shayuga Nagayo. These women were, in singularly or in pairs, were tremendous workers. And they were great at getting murdered by these huge killer heels. They were great at it. So that is the basis of the pro wrestling game. So when this came to America, where women's wrestling, when this came out, it was almost non-existent. I mean, really, it was sort of at a peak in a way because the WWF had Wendy Richter. And
wait a minute, you just said it was at its peak yet simultaneously non-existent.
Well, it's both. Because its peak back then was not good. And but that was sort of the age when Hulk Hogan and Wendy Richter were the two champs. And Wendy Richter, I guess she had her year or so. The Rock and Wrestling connection with Cyndi Lauper. But I don't think women's wrestling was anywhere near big enough to base a game on.
Right, sure.
And so when they converted this to the U.S., they wisely chose to take out the Japanese women's angle and make it men. And so you've got they added two different teams to the game. So one of the teams you get are the Mad Soldiers, right? You get the Orient Express. You get the Crush Brothers. These teams actually have names. The good guys are the Crush Brothers, Elder and Younger Crusher.
Crush the Elder. That's his
the
proper
Orient
name.
Express, Dragonfly, and Giant Bull. And then you've got the bad guys, the Mad Soldiers, Muscle Soldier and Iron Soldier, and the Great Mask Men, which were Green Mask and Stonehead. My personal favorite. Now, when you play these different wrestlers, they do have different moves, and they do have a special ability. Well, if you're a good guy or a bad guy. The two bad guy teams, like I said, were the Crush Brothers and the Orient Express, and they could go outside the ring and hit you with a chair if one was there. The good guy teams could do the high spots. They could come off the top rope.
Now, is that a traditional thing in wrestling that you've noticed where only heels use foreign objects outside the ring?
It was more traditional when this game would have been made than it is now.
Right.
Now anything goes crazy time, right? So you compete in tag team contests, and you go through 3 different leagues. The Mexican League, and if you win that, you win the Mexican title. And I will say that seems kind of odd to people, I guess, but in Japan, it's a tradition to send your young wrestlers to other promotions in other parts of the world for a couple years of experience before they bring you back. Traditionally in Japan, you go through their Japanese wrestling school. Then you're what's called a young boy or a young girl, which basically means you're a stooge that's at ringside who occasionally gets murdered by one of the bad guys. You're also helping people to and from the ring, taking robes, helping put the ring up, stuff like that. Then after you do that for a while, they send you a bride. And they
send you a lady?
Yeah. Well, if you're a lady, I guess they send you a man. Now, they send you to different countries. So, like, it's funny. Mexico and Canada and America are the 3 countries they send a lot of guys to. And the girls would occasionally do the same. And then they would eventually come back as a new persona, at a big push because they'd be experienced now. And it's worked pretty well. So having the Japanese game start in the Mexican League with the Mexican title makes a little more sense. Then you've got the Pacific title, and it's in Hawaii, and the world title in New York City. Now, this is where the game gets a little goofy. Well, this, among other things. So most games with different wrestlers, you'll run through the roster over and over. Not pro wrestling. So pro wrestling, you start going after the Mexican title, and you pick your team, and you'll fight one of the other teams 10 consecutive times. All right, you have to beat them. And then when you beat them, you win that belt. Then there's a cool cutscene of your guy landing in a jet plane, which is actually pretty cool looking. Probably, it's by far the best graphics of the game. Then you'll go after the Pacific belts in Hawaii. And believe it or not, Hawaii does have and always had a pretty decent wrestling scene. Of course, it was a good stopping point for the Japanese contingents that came over, and
Right.
and a lot of American wrestlers that go to work there because of the climate and whatnot. So you would win those Pacific belts against another tag team, 10 matches. And then finally, you would go after the world title in New York. Again, another jet flies you down, and you'd go after the world tag titles in New York against another team for 10 consecutive matches. And then once you win that, pretty much effectively, there's no inscriptions. It's like you win the belts, game over. That's pretty much it. There's no celebration. There's no nothing, which is kind of a letdown.
Yeah.
So that explains how the game works in terms of the staging and stuff. So what actually do you do in the game? You've got 2 wrestlers to work with, and you go in and try to beat up the other guys. There's a life bar at the top of the screen. And you will, basically, your buttons punch and kick. And you can also bounce off the ropes and charge. Unlike most wrestling games, in fact, almost every wrestling game, this doesn't have a lockup, like a traditional pro wrestling lockup where you come in like this.
The grapple.
That's right. This basically... and this took a while for me to get used to until I understood the gimmick. This game, you basically pummel your opponent until they fall down. Then they'll get up quick. But if you pummel them and are quick enough, then you can perform a move.
Right.
All right?
Right.
Different wrestlers have different moves. Some guys have a pile driver, and some guys have like a drop kick. And
Giant swing.
Giant swing, body
favorite.
slam. So once you've got these guys down, you go over and you begin to grapple them, and basically what that means is you go over to them, hit the button, and your guy will pick them up and perform a maneuver, right? And if you perform it close enough to the ropes, they might fly out of the ring, and you get some time out in the cement. And if you're a bad guy, there might be a chair out there for you, and if you're a good guy, there may be a chair out there for your opponent. So you don't want to tangle with them. When you want to go to the corner and tag, you just sort of go over and hit the button, and your partner comes in. And that's pretty much the long and short of it. You can pummel each other until you think you've got their energy low enough to pin them, and then you'll either pin them or they'll kick out, and it continues after that. All that sounds okay, but, and it's a big but, once you play this game for about 5 minutes, you realize that you can basically kick the opponent until they fall over repeatedly without moving. You just basically kick them in the head, and they'll continuously walk towards you until they fall over. So it's more like independent local pro wrestling, like down the street here in Milton, where I think I've seen a match of that quality. And so once you understand that you can just kick the guy until he falls over, you just start kicking him until he falls over, then you put a move on him. And I like to body slam the guy a few 3 or 4 times, and then eventually that wears him down and you pin him. I mean, that's it. That's the game. And it really wrecks it. It wrecks the game in every way. Now, I didn't get a chance to play 2 people at this. I would assume that would be more fun. And I would assume, hopefully, the guy you're playing is smart enough not to keep walking forward as you kick him repeatedly. But, that's the long and short. You kick him, he falls over, you pin him. This game gets monotonous quickly. Sometimes I wouldn't kick him. I would just, try to have fun and do something else. And the computer can be pretty tough. But it's the action is sort of chaotic. It's sort of tough. I mean, there's a lot of, even if you're not just standing there and kicking him, if you just sort of walk backwards and punch and kick a little bit and be strategic, you still pretty much, the effect's the same. The computer's an idiot. He keeps coming at you. It's kind of lame, to be completely honest with you. I just did not have a whole lot of fun with this particular title that you chose for me, Boat. I did like the background. I knew this title from the arcade. Ironically, me and my son played the arcade version of this just like a couple of months ago. He's like, "Hey, what's this? It's all women's wrestling." I was like, "Yeah, let's give that a shot." The arcade version is more fun, but it's not great. And from what I've heard, the ladies' version that was released in Japan is fairly similar. I mean, it's pretty much exactly the same with just women instead of men. There's a code, which I didn't try this, but I read that there's a code you can put in. If you type it in, you can wrestle 2 aliens. So that's kind of interesting. If I'd have bought this for the Master System and been a big pro wrestling fan, I would not be happy. Now, all that aside, this game has a following in a weird way. I read a lot of people talking about it when I was doing some research, and very positively. and I was surprised. A game that I was much more into back in the day was a game called Tag Team Wrestling. Have you ever played that?
No.
This was an arcade game that got ported to everything. The
I think
NES.
I played the arcade version, I think.
And you play two baby faces against. There's only 4 guys in this one. You against a masked guy and a big bruiser guy, and you go at it that way. And that game's a lot more fun because once you grapple, you quickly hit your button to flip through a list of moves. And you've got a big list you can do. There's Cobra Clutch, head kicks, and drop kicks and stuff. And this game is extremely limited too, but it's of the same era. It's very similar graphically, and it's more fun in my opinion. I will say that one thing the game does do well is the ref counts in English, which is pretty cool. So it's got a little digitized sound there for the ref, which is kind of neat. But that's probably about the highlight for me. What did you think about it?
I think you're being way, way, way too hard on this game.
All right. I'm listening.
This game is one of the best wrestling titles I've ever played in my life.
All right. Justify that one, Boatster.
So it starts with the opening scene when you see the fist struggle to punch through the piece of paper. And then this guy emerges like Kool-Aid Man.
And it punches through in a weird angle.
Like a frame by frame angle coming through.
When I first loaded this up and I saw it, I was like, man, he really struggled with that. That's not a good sign.
So this game is great for a number of reasons.
All right.
One, there's a large stable of characters to pick from, and they are not all just rip-offs of like WWE superstars or Japanese superstars of the time. They're original, truly outrageous wrestling heroes. Okay?
How many Japanese wrestlers of the time can you name?
Hundreds. So, okay. Are they based on Japanese people?
I don't know. One sort of looks like Bruiser Brody or Black Bart, and the masked guys. Who knows?
Right.
I know they're based on the Crush Gals.
I choose to believe that they are truly original.
All right. I will say, I can just look at them and say, okay, this is where this comes from. I'll give you that.
Which is what a lot of wrestling games did. Number 2, there is a play-by-play system in place where every blow that you land of any kind, they tell you what you've done.
That's
okay,
true.
So for people that struggle with what wrestling moves are, and it gives me a chance to learn. Like I learned what a body attack was. It was where you take your chest and you just sort of ram into somebody. I didn't know that was a thing. That pro wrestling taught me that. So I think it's cool that your guy, they move quickly around the ring. You don't, in so many wrestling games, especially from this era, your guys are about the most sluggish, oafs that have ever walked the earth. These guys get around the ring pretty well. And when you start to run up against the ropes, they move at Mach 10. They're moving quickly, back and forth.
It's very odd how quickly they move at some point.
The action outside the ring is really cool. The perspective changes, so it gives you a lot of room to work down there. The fact I thought it was very easy to control. There's a limited moveset. There's a limited moveset in almost every game. The way that you trigger special moves, I mean, you're right. It doesn't work the same as a lot of wrestling games, which everything is based off the grapple. And this one, everything is based after the takedown. But other than that, it's the same mechanic as every 8-bit wrestling game. You do something, and that allows you to do your special move. I didn't have any trouble performing the moves. I didn't have a problem with the fact that you could just kick guys and beat them down and beat them, because I like it when I win. And so that didn't bother me. I realized that if you were playing a second player, it would probably be even more fun. But I would much rather be in that sort of situation than not be able to do anything and not be able to win. I like being able to. I thought the jet landing stuff was super awesome.
Yeah.
The crowd is into it. I mean, look at their faces. They love it.
Yeah. Ecstatic.
No, they're not static.
They look like a modern wrestling crowd. Bored, listless, looking at the clock, waiting to get out of there, thinking about traffic.
I compare this to the NES Pro Wrestling game.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's hear that comparison.
Okay. I think this is a much more fun game to play than NES Pro Wrestling. The only thing that I like more about NES Pro Wrestling is the camera guy that runs around the ring. That's cool tech right there. But man, pro wrestling.
You can't. Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm completely serious. I would rather play this any day of the week.
Man.
Okay.
Not me, buddy. I thought the NES version was way better.
I think you haven't played it in a while. If you went back to it after playing this, you'd know what I was talking about.
Hey, I was a big Starman fan.
what about King Corn Karn? He's the martial arts expert.
He's got a wacky name.
Even down to the box art. I mean, a headless man giving somebody a headlock.
I assume he's giving himself a headlock a noogie.
Nothing says pro wrestling like that image right there.
I will say, if we're gonna throw out compliments, I will say this: your wrestlers get an entrance, which is cool. Mm-hmm. They come down the aisle.
I forgot about that. That's another thing I love.
They do that. That is amusing, and they're that's funny. But I mean, it's a broken game. That's the bottom line. It's a broken game. If this had the actual, if we were playing the Japanese version where I had an affinity towards the characters, it really wouldn't have mattered. But at least I would have been like, oh look, I'm one of the Crush gals or whatever. But this,
I do the same thing. I'm like, look at me, I'm Stonehead.
Stonehead's, I'll give you that. Stonehead's, that's a good name. I'm surprised you liked this as much as you did.
This game is great. I don't know what's wrong with you.
I wasn't down with the clown on this one, Mr. Bode. I'm not gonna lie to you, but I'm happy to say that I played it and I enjoyed finding out about it. You know, because like I said, not ever playing it before. In fact, I think I may own this, and I'll never put it in. So that's an indictment of my Master System play. But you won Switcheroo. You got the good game, and then gave me the crummy.
I disagree. So I would rather play pro wrestling any day of the week.
Listen, you said you were all about the win, so just take the win. Be happy for the win.
Okay, that's fine.
That's it. So anyway, fun times. We'll do Switcheroo again sometime.
Oh, you didn't. We forgot. I got so into my adamant defense that I didn't give you a chance to tell us about the eBay prices for
eBay
pro wrestling.
El Cheapo Grande, pretty much about the same as yours. I found the loose card for under $5, and the box for $7 to $10.
Okay,
so
cool.
Cheapo, and a lot of Master System games are El Cheapo. Now that much said, there are a couple Master System games that are that get up there. There's a game called Psycho Fox that misspelled its own name.
Monopoly is also misspelled on the cartridge of the Sega Master System. So very funny. Yeah.
So anytime they screw up a cartridge, that's gold. That's gold. So let's talk about Patreon, Mr. Boat. For you ARG fans, if you'd like to support the show, we have opened up ARG Presents to Patreon followers. If you are interested in giving us $1 or $2 to keep the show rolling, we'd appreciate it. And of course, don't feel obligated. But we do have a Patreon page set up. Bo, do you have the particulars on that?
Yeah, it is patreon.com/Amigos Podcast. And for as little as $1 a month, you can help us keep ARG Presents going.
And as we mention every time, if you are an Amigos backer, do not feel obligated to give more money for ARG Presents.
I mean, if you want to throw us, $50, $100, $200 a month.
Hell, if you want to send me a solid gold boat in the mail, I'll take it.
Yeah, but if
I guess you'd get that, wouldn't you? Solid gold boat.
I'd have to.
Can you imagine having that right in your front yard? Just a big.
I'd probably just move into it.
It would never go in the water.
No.
Yeah, that'd be no good. So, Bo, what about next week? How do you want to play it?
Next week, Aaron, we're going to do TurboGrafx 16.
Yes, we are normally at this point we would unveil the Retro Roulette. However, we are filming ahead due to vacation arrangements, and so we have taken Lady Luck by the ear and tweaked her and chosen something for ourselves, and we're going to give the TurboGrafx 16 a shot. So, Bo, what are you going to play on the TurboGrafx 16?
I'm going to play Magical Chase.
Magical Chase. I will be playing a game I've heard a lot about, Blazing Lasers.
Ooh, can't wait.
Sounds good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I think with that, we will bid you all a fond adieu, and until next week,
adios. Aaron and John making a new podcast.